Can everybody see it? Are we all good with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, so I'm Alex, and I live in Hackney, Wick and Fish Island, as well as running a consultancy and that works across London and the southeast and other parts of the UK. Actually, I'm very committed and connected to kind of taking action in my own neighbourhood. So not just doing the work that we do with other neighbourhoods, doing it in my own patch. And I've been working for the last sort of 3 years or so with local organisations to develop Reroute, which is the kind of overarching brand narrative for the project that we're working on, which is really about community action to tackle waste in our neighbourhood. It's the concept of the Reroute and looking at waste and how we tackle it from the ground up is driven by the Community Development Trust, as Ramya said, and that is, I think it's just worth having a bit of background into this. The CDT, as it's known, it was formed by local enterprises and community groups who felt concerned, I guess, at first about the sort of scale of development in the Olympic Park area and how that would affect their livelihoods, and through lots of work with communities, also kind of recognizing that there was a sort of an overarching kind of feeling that people felt that yes, private development is great, it's going to bring loads of good opportunities for people, but we need to sit alongside that some sort of community ownership model. And that's long-term, and that's stewardship of spaces in a kind of community hands, I guess, so that it can kind of counterbalance private sector and work with public sector, but also it provides a really good route for the private sector and East Bank partners and people like UCL to kind of access what's happening locally on the ground. And so you need that kind of civic infrastructure in a neighbourhood, in every neighbourhood, I think, for places to function really healthily and really well, so that you've got local communities accessing what they need. Developers are building on root structures that are already here and not trying to just impose new things that don't really land well. So it's having that kind of harmonisation within a community. So we're trying to fill that gap. That's the moments there. So that's kind of where it comes from. So, and we work in equal measure with the third sector, the HE sector, the private sector, and the public sector. So across all sectors to kind of bring people together and work on strategies together. So, how we sort of work at a high level, I guess, is we across those sectors, we try to find areas of commonality. So what is it that everyone can sort of say? It may not be your top priority, but what are the things that really concern you? What are things that your organisation or your resident group is wanting to think about, look at, try to tackle? And the thing that's come up in our area is the environmental sustainability. So whether you're living on an estate and you're worried about heating bills, and the costs of that and the pinch on you at the bottom line, or whether you're UCL and you're looking at it from a really high level academic point of view, or whether you're public sector and you've got all these targets and you've got to hit net zero, or whether you're local business and you've got a massive problem with the kind of mass amounts of plastic, single-use plastic or waste. It hits sort of all audiences in our area. And so that was the thing that we found and that we wanted to focus on. And the way we thought we'd do that is to try and do this as ground up work, where we build a network of people who are interested in it, create a concept, raise funding off the back of that, try to develop some pilot projects, which is kind of where we're at now, point 4, where we're trying to make the case, show who's involved in it and how it can work, and then look to find like long-term funding and long-term business models that can help us capitalize what we've developed and then expand that into either new areas, actually geographical areas, or try and test the model and stretch the model, and test out new ideas, and then ultimately look at kind of system change, and also then taking on other challenges, or extending that into other areas like sort of housing and retrofits and things like that. So yeah, I've talked a little bit about this. We work across all the sectors. So where we've got to is in all of the work that we've been doing, we probably engaged with 50 to 100 different groups in our local area. We've done lots of sort of, workshops and meetings and group sessions and, kind of collaborative work to understand how this can work with people who are practitioners as well as people who are impacted by climate change. And we came up with this kind of idea that actually what we want to get to, our ultimate goal is here, with a CDT as well, leading it, is that we develop these kind of hub structures, which are a series of spaces which look to help and support and hold space, I guess, for businesses, community groups, education sector, kind of those who are trying to develop models of circular economy. So taking waste out of the local area, reprofiling it in some way, or trying to disrupt the waste even happening in the first place, and developing products to do that, or reusing it or recycling it. So it's all of those things, and we're sort of not that fussy about which bit of that is. It's more about our role in this is to sort of support with finding space so that those organisations can do their thing. And I think Ramya said at the beginning, like we're all about trying to find sort of models that can be affordable for people. So obviously anyone can get commercial space. If you can pay for it, you can have it. And that's not really our world. Our world is support those who've got new ideas, who are starting out on a business, who want to take a new product, or a bit of like a new product line on that's additional, and so they need that affordability and a bit of flexibility around how they do that. So that's our ideal, is to get these sort of hubs working across East London, primarily in Olympic Park. And we're at pilot phase, I guess. We got some money from the GLA, quite a lot of money from the GLA and Shift and LLDC. Not much capital, but quite a lot of revenue to sort of develop all of this strategy, all these ideas, putting together proposals, helping us to find the space. And we've now got some pilot projects. In order to get the money, we had to sort of demonstrate what is, all of this is all very sort of conceptual and everything. So can you sort of explain how you think your hub might work? What are you talking about here? And sort of, as I said, we're not specialising in any particular material. We're not specialising in any part of the sort of chain of product development. We're simply trying to find enough space. I guess it's quantums of space in areas that are underused, which we can get for pretty much nothing or very little, where we can enable businesses and organisations and academics to be in space and put there and help them with the capacity to build out their space and then run it and operationalize it. So this is our first concept design. This site here is Chapman Road, which is in Hackney, Wick. Hackney Wick, for those people, sorry to realise there's people who might not know the geography. Hackney Wick is right next to the Olympic Park in East London. It's a relatively small geography of about 20,000 people. It had a population here before the Olympics arrived. I mean, it's had a radical transformation since. So that's the sort of background. But there's not very much space around anymore. But there are pockets, and we are finding bits and pieces. This site it's currently being used as a sort of concrete storage area, so it's not very publicly accessible at all. It has a use and it's important, helps fix roads and things like that. But we're saying this site could be used in a different way. We want to reimagine it as a sort of first concept for the circular economy hub. And so you've got a range of different uses here where the public can engage with this, and businesses can develop their ideas and test things and trial things. This site is owned by Hackney Council. This is still a concept. We are in the conversation with Hackney Council about a further iteration to this idea, which would include industrial units on the ground floor and housing, which makes it financially work. So anyway, still a way to go on that side, but you get the idea, hopefully, from this image, the the sort of, when we talk about a hub, we're talking about a kind of range of different uses and a range of different types of spaces, all kind of being in one area, so that, you know, people, you've got a kind of central point where people can come and people know it's a thing, and it has a sort of identity. It's, yeah, and often these businesses like to share ideas and share resources, so there's another sort of rationale for trying to put people together. So that's that. So we have got 2 live projects. So all the design work, all the concept work, all the kind of work we've done to sort of develop strategies, to look at business plans, everything else. We have got two live projects. This design was actually done with UCL. I'm sort of showing you because you're UCL people, and you might be interested to know that in enabling us to get our first site, we worked with UCL on a hypothetical idea to use a bit of the UCL site at UCL East. There's a sort of large bit of concourse that is earmarked ultimately for student accommodation, but they're sort of like, oh, we don't know if we're going to use it yet, so let's just like let's develop an idea off of it, which we'd hoped we could get into delivery. And I won't bore you with the reasons, but it's just too difficult to do that, so we can't do that. However, we've used the concept of what we developed with UCL to help us secure our first real site, real bricks and mortar. But I will just talk you through this one really quickly, because I really like this this design, because what it does is it really speaks to the idea of circular businesses and how they work. So at the bottom corner, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but in here, waste product enters the site by freight, cargo, you know, electric vehicles and bikes and stuff. So the waste material comes in. For now, let's say it's glass bottles that they've come to the end of their life. And there's loads of bars and stuff in Hackney, Wick, by the way. So there's a whole load of stuff that just gets thrown out. They could be recycled, but actually there are businesses that are taking glass and repurposing them and putting them back into the local community. So the glass bottles come in here. They get washed and sorted in this big kind of semi-open canopé space, and then they get sorted into their different components and bits taken off them, and the, you know, bits of paper removed and anything else, and then they come into here where they are broken down even further into like a fine sand, a bit like a clay, and then that kind of raw material can be used by other businesses in these spaces here to develop new materials. So some of them might develop ceramics, some of them might develop lampshades, or all sorts of things. There's a whole lot sort of industry about how you take this raw material and you develop it into new things, and then you take it out and you package it all up again, and then you send it out. So I'm oversimplifying, because it's a slightly more involved than that, and you could have we modeled with UCL that you could have up to 5 different material streams here that all needed some sort of a similar sort of process, where you would have them come in, have washed and sorted, and then somehow broken down, or whatever needs to happen to them with some machinery here, some sort of, and then there's some other additional sort of manufacturing of that, using that more material with the same business or with different businesses, and then the packaging it out. So I thought it was really neat and nifty. In this space here, we had a sort of more tech space where it wasn't about manufacturing, it was more desk space, because all businesses were wanting something where they could do their marketing, they could do their computer-based work, etc., etc. So they needed that to sit alongside, ideally sit alongside their manufacturing team. And then the loop space at the back we developed, which is a community hub where you could have products being shown in this space here. So it's like a little retail area, but more a sort of showcase and exhibition space. But here you'd have workshops where people will be learning about what's going on in the hub. We could have, you know, academics explaining all of their work as well, and community involvement and engagement and participation. So it's a really nice idea. It's about 10,000 square foot worth of space, and we worked up the business model that can support that. It's new and it's different, and there isn't anything like that in London that I know of, and I haven't seen it in anywhere else. Now we've taken that concept, we've taken as much as we can about that concept, and we can't do it on the UCL site, but we have found a warehouse. And because of the work we did with UCL, we found this warehouse, which is right in the heart of Hackney Wick. This is the canal. Here on this side is a school, primary school, and that's the Olympic Park. And you're looking from this vista here, you're looking right back over the Olympic Park. You can see East Bank from here, and there's a bridge over into the Olympic Park. So it's very, very central to the whole geography for us. This warehouse we have for a year, and then we have a rolling monthly lease. In many ways, it's quite useful for us to test what we had developed with UCL. We've got about 6 or 7 businesses in there at the moment. I'll talk to you about them in a second. It's over 2 floors, and we really can bash about. We can be noisy. We're not overlooked by any residential here. It's it's going to be knocked down. It'll be rebuilt as a co-living and commercial space. So the developer doesn't care really what we do with it. There's a limit to how much you would invest in it because it's only a year. So we've had to do a real cheap job of putting up partition walls and making good and doing the security and all of that sort of stuff. But it's great because we have got some outdoor space which people need, and we're putting in a community garden centre there as well. And there's kind of decent access in here and through there for the businesses that need to get stuff in and out. I guess it's a struggle to make too much publicly available on the ground floor because the businesses need the access, and that's been a challenge. But on the first floor, the idea is, and we're not quite there yet, but we'd have it as a sort of exhibition space, workshop space. We might have markets and things like that in there to test various other things. But yeah, so and again, it's the point of it is that we're having a hub. So it means we're having a cluster of a number of businesses. It isn't just one material use in here. There's several. These are the businesses that currently occupy the space. And we really only been able to get people in from the last month or so because we've had to do a sort of build to get the building ready. So it's still quite early. But you've got a sense of the types of business. So Silo is actually is building a koji room, which is taking food waste out of the local area, fermenting the food into different kind of kojis and kimchis and all these different fermented products, and then they will sell it back to the market locally and further afield. So it's a really good closed loop project, that one, and that is a spin-off from the zero waste restaurant which they already run in the local area. So it's a really good example of sort of how we're wanting this hub to work. You know, these guys want to test something, they need cheap rent, you know, we're enabling that. They sit alongside a bunch of other different types of spin-offs or versions of circular economy, I guess. Are You Mad take mostly plastic waste, and then they create lots of interest. This is them here, actually. They do sort of, so they've got what we've got, plastic tabletops, combs, bowls. They do accessories, all sorts of things. They do a lot with litter picking and getting the big public engagement. I think they'll take our top floor and do some public engagement stuff, which would be great. Zero is a green logistics, so they support the local area in and around East London, but they do focus a lot on creative industry stuff. So you get a sense of the different types of business. It is a real range, and I guess what they're doing in there is mostly it's developing products of some sort or another on a very, very small scale. So they've got a piece of that warehouse space, and they're developing small scale new products. That's what they're doing. So yeah, the koji room probably occupies about 200 square foot of space. It's quite small, but it's there to test its idea and see if that can work and see if they can scale it. The other one to point out, I guess, is Alive Labs, which is a local business to East London who are developing a moss product, which replaces green walls. So green walls famously fail. They need a lot of water and they die quickly, whereas moss is very durable and will last in almost everything, any environment. I've got a picture later on about growing moss in the desert, and they have taken a wall of the hub, so to test whether or not their new product can survive a full season. So, and it's quite good because we've got a sort of big piece of graffiti art which kind of indicates it's there, and all the rest of it. So that's great. And they've received funding along with a few others on this list from the LLDC's innovation program. So we work very closely with LLDC and their Shift Innovation program and support the businesses coming through that have got funding to try new products. So then the other space we've got is a slightly smaller unit. This is a retail unit that's not being used in our local area. It's within the fashion district. And so we've taken a 2-year lease with the social housing landlord to test a textile reuse hub, which is run by a social enterprise called Yodimo. And they take textile waste from wholesale and sell it to makers across East London. They also run a young makers program which supports young people 18 to 30 who have their own business in fashion industry but want to become more circular in how they do their business. So that's all sponsored by the GLA. And now we've got private sector funding for that as well, to do another 3 years. And again, that one, we're looking to scale it. And there's a site we're working on in Tower Hamlets which want to take this on more permanently. So we're looking to seed it and then scale it out and have a more permanent space for that. Lessons learned: short leases make business interest limited. It's not really enough at the moment of a runway to see whether the business model can really work, because you kind of get people in. By the time you've got people in, you know, they pay rent for a bit and then they have to start looking for other places because they can't just wait until the thing just stops. They have to, you know, they've got to keep their business going. So we've got a very short window, and it's too short really, but it's enough to sort of have a showcase, but not enough for a business model. Trying to reuse reusable materials is really challenging. We'd hoped that we were going to do all the fit out for our Wallace Road site, the warehouse, with reusable, but it just doesn't line up. The timings don't work, and when you're on a short lease, you haven't got the run up to say, okay, well, for 6 months we'll just try and pick up as much material as we can that we think we can work with, hold it in the warehouse, and then start to build. It doesn't work like that. It's like, oh well, we've got some glass now from someone, okay, but we haven't got the frame, okay, but we haven't got but we need the floor, and it just becomes completely impossible. And it's really annoying because when we were doing the work with UCL to begin with, we were trying to see if we could use some reusable material in that kind of, you know, build from nothing concept design. So that's really difficult. And we did take some risks. We took some stuff and then we haven't been able to use it, so we've had to move it on, and that's just a resource thing, which, you know, it can't really, you know, it's difficult to manage that. We found that really difficult and really frustrating. We've also been offered funding to take stuff for much longer period, but if we haven't got a lease, we can't take the money and we can't do the project. So having at least 10 years would enable us to do something much more with reused materials, in my view. I said industrial works well. It needs to be affordable, flexible. Access is really important. Having individualized spaces as much as you can. That's not always possible, but having spaces that can be flexible so that you can have an individualized space, but if someone moves on, you can adapt it. So the next person who wants something different, it's quite easy and not too expensive to do. So I think we've come up with some kind of neat fit out sort of modular ways of doing things, which is quite interesting. And the access to business and academic support is really, really important for these businesses because they're just starting out, a lot of them, or their new product is just starting out. So they really want to have the insight to help them build their product. And future opportunities, just kind of conscious of time. So for us, this is I guess we're in the prove the model phase, and we're in the pilot phase. We need to prove the model phase. in order to prove the model, we need longer leases. We need a minimum of 8 to 10 years. We're flexible. We really need something in our, so for those of you who don't know the area, this is the Olympic Park in here, actually in here, where Hackney, Tower Hamlets, it's all in, it's that, oh shoot, sorry. It's all in that bit there. So it's right in the heart of this. And so we really need something in that area, because that is about a sort of credibility of who we are and where we've come from and our heritage and like what we're trying to serve and who we're trying to support. However, we recognise, well, all of these boroughs want us to work with them. So, and they've got more land and there's probably more opportunity to actually prove the model if we go wider. Because we're getting a bit stuck where we are because we're just limiting our geography. We need 10,000 square foot of space. We need really low rents, and we can, if we have a long lease, we can tether it upwards as people mature, as businesses mature, as our model works. I think 5-6 years you get to a sort of decent rent, and then you can talk to landlords about profit shares and things like that. But at the beginning, you have to accept a sort of lower rent. That makes it more difficult to find space, obviously. But all types of space we can work with. So that's the beauty of it. Is I think where we can add value is working in spaces that are really hard to let, or where local authorities like can't. It just it was a health centre and nobody in the commercial world wants it. So what can you do with it? And we can raise money for fit out and refurb. We've done that. Once we've got a lease, it's much easier to do that. And there's loads of money out there for it. But without a lease, you can't do it. And we've got loads of partners. So I've obviously named you guys because I'm talking to you. But there are stacks of partners, whether they're investors or whether they're community groups or stakeholders. There's a load of people who want to be involved in this. So bringing them in makes it even more interesting. And I think then you can start opening up the conversation properly about how you reuse buildings and reuse the materials and have a really strong model. But without the longer lease, it's I think that's it's almost impossible. Just as a left field thing, and because you guys are all in the construction industry, I don't know if you know about the Future Food System. They are looking for a space. They were in Melbourne city centre. They're part of Silo, which is the guys that do the fermented food. We've got a really strong relationship with them. We've been desperately trying to find them a sort of standalone space where they can put their demonstrator house, which basically means you live completely off grid, and you grow your own food. It produces its own energy. It's very, very high tech. And we think it's an exemplar. It's not that you would build all housing like this, but you could use some of what they're showing you in this house in elements of construction and in terms of development and stuff. And so we think because we are an innovation district here at the Olympic Park, that there should be this sort of project that sits alongside what we're doing with the Circular Economy Hub, which you can live in this space. You can live in it for to see how it works. And but they run cookery programs and they do growing programs, and it's a real showcase. It's not a sort of closed thing. So that's a sort of slightly left field thing, and that probably takes us to the end. Did I cover everything that you wanted me to cover, Raman?
Yeah. Someone might have more questions about your experience around trying to use the construction materials again. Does anyone want to have any questions for Alex? Or maybe you could add some more. We'll see if anyone else has any questions. Julia, there you go.
Yeah, no, thank you, Alex. I thought that was really fascinating, very diverse talk. I was really interested and also in a way disappointed about your experience of trying to use recovered materials and fitting out your space. And I really feel it in the sense that when we're refurbishing our flat, we had the same thing. I don't think we ended up getting a single reused thing in our flat, just simply because the logistics were not possible. But I think my question is about, because you said something about you had materials stored and you had to move them on. And I think for material storage hubs, this is an issue overall of how do you decide what you're going to collect and and what sort of, is there a system for deciding how long you keep it, or what to take in the first place, when to get rid of it? How is that done?
Well, for us in that example, I was talking about what we wanted was to have materials for the fit out of the warehouse. So the warehouse is just 2 big massive rooms, one on the ground floor pretty much, there's a few little spaces, and then one on the first floor. And what we were seeking was materials to be able to do the fit out, and that was what we really wanted. So we wanted to take like panels and windows and all the stuff that you need to doors, to partition out a single studio from another single studio and create corridors and have kitchens for people, so all of that sort of stuff. And in the end, we were offered quite a lot. I think actually accessing this stuff isn't that difficult. If you want it, you can find it. But it wasn't, when we got it, we then realized that the businesses wanted certain slightly different things, and it was like not all of it was wasted, but quite a lot of it was like, this isn't really quite what they need. And I think had we had longer lease time, the order I would have done it in is secure some of the businesses that you really want in there, work with them on what they need, see if you can source the material, and then you can build it. But we had to do all of these things simultaneously because we just don't have the time. So we had to try and, so we took a risk. And yeah, it was like, well, we tried it and it didn't really work. So we then had to move it on to someone else who could use it. So that's what I was talking about in that context. In terms of like just general materials, or we've left it down to the businesses to work that out. So with the textile reuse hub, that's really interesting. Sometimes they get too much textile, and it's almost like they're sort of bursting, and they have to spend quite a lot of time sorting, and then they've got to try and get it back out into the market. And I think they're always fine tuning that. If I'm honest, I'm not close enough to every individual business to work out how they do that. I should have said at the beginning, we're a community development trust. Our skill set is to find space and put all the right partnerships together and find the funding and bolt everything together, do the strategy. Our skill set is we're not experts in any part of the sort of circular economy per se. Like I have a surface level information about kind of a lot of it, I guess, just because we're working on this and we have to understand what sort of space they need and therefore how their business work and all of that stuff. But I'm not the sort of technical expert on any of it. So like how they run their supply chains and all that sort of stuff, we let them do that.
Yeah. Do you have, I mean, from talking to them though, do you have an impression that this is something that they have resolved to their satisfaction within each of their business? No, it's a major issue.
So storage is, for every business in the circular economy, storage is a major issue because particularly in London, what we have is very, very high rents, and storage really, you don't want to pay a lot of money to just store stuff. So there are a lot of them use places like storage centres, and then they've got to transport things back and forward, or you then end up just going really, really far out of London. So you end up in, quite far out. And that most of them in a sort of closed loop environment, you want to be closer to neighbourhoods and where things are working and where your waste streams are. So it's a major issue. And when we looked at the UCL site, we did build in some storage, but it does have an impact on the business model. It has an impact on the bottom line, because it's like, well, you can only pay about £2 a square foot for that.
Yeah, but it's not just the amount of space. It's also, how do you decide? I mean, it's a bit like everybody's garage, I always say, right? Like, you have something, it seems useful. Are you going to hang on to it? How do you make that decision? And I think that must be an enormous problem. And it would be fantastic to combine your skill set in sourcing space with somebody who has a skill set in, I mean, I don't know how different it would be, if a company like Amazon or some, companies who do storage of new goods, how different would that be from I'm not suggesting it's the same or different. I'm just wondering, is it actually the same thing or is it something different? I don't know that that's actually all that well understood. Because, if you have an Amazon warehouse and you have to decide, how many batteries of different kinds to get in, you really need a very large organization, I think, to be able to have a statistically based model for something like that. And it's, anyway, it's a challenge. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And Amazon don't just have one, do they? They've got like, they're drawing they're drawing the materials or the products from all these other places, and then they store it and then they ship it out. And so it's a slightly different, maybe there is something in that. We haven't looked at it.
Yeah.
Mohammed, you had a question?
Yes, thank you very much, Alex. It was a really exciting presentation, a lot of insights. I think I've got 2 questions. The first one, have you thought about a replication of the hub outside London in different regions, if possible? And the second one, I know that you identify some challenges in your lesson learned in relation to storage and the risks associated with material reuse. But in general, by and large, have you encountered any challenges either among the community or among the industry partners or stakeholders in terms of awareness of the circular economy principles, how they are implemented, and most importantly, a lot of confusion between waste management and circular economy?
Yeah, I mean, yes and yes, I guess. So yes, we would like to take the model outside. I think I don't think we're in the business of spending a lot of time trying to find sites for it outside, because we just don't have the resources and capacity. But if like Manchester was to ring me up tomorrow and say, look, we've got this site, we've got the money, we need someone to come and deliver it, would you do that? And it's stacked up, then yes. I would say though that I think our ethos, our philosophy would be to set something up but enable local community to do it. So it'd be like helping someone to kind of like build the capacity within that community to do it themselves. That would be, I don't think it doesn't, we definitely wouldn't want to be like permanently there, because that isn't,
of course.
It's all about trying to get, community ownership. So it's about that community having the ownership of it and stuff. But yes, we would do that. And that's kind of part of the idea, is actually to develop something innovative that can sort of be transported and can be enabled in other places. So it's not just to keep it here. And then your second question about, what was it about encountering challenges around people understanding the circular economy? And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think it's really, even within the circular economy, there's sort of different parts to it, isn't there? So it's sort of quite it's complicated, I guess. It's complex, and there's always new technologies and new approaches and new methodologies that are sort of being tested and changed. So it's a sort of changing thing, which makes it very exciting, but it also makes it quite difficult to then sort of communicate. The way we've talked to our communities about it is really about the issues that matter to them. So like I said before about, talking about people worried about money and how do you reuse more of your clothes? How do you darn your socks? How do you mend your skirts? How do you, so people are interested in that. And then you can talk to them about that level of like practicality about how it impacts your day to day, rather than getting them into, the circular economy and what it all means, because they just get people to sort of engage in it at their level, at where they are interested in it, and then then people pick it up, and then you can open up to more things. And businesses, I guess, I think there's a struggle there. I think businesses are caught a little bit, if I'm honest, because they want to be more green and more environmentally friendly. So the non-circular economy business I'm talking about here, so just someone running a bar, they want to be more eco-friendly, a lot of them, but they rely on someone coming up with a design and a technology to enable that. So, and they don't really have the time to go and research it, and they want it to cost less. So it all comes down to money. You know, if you can provide a different type of like compostable mug, I think compostable is, there's questions about whether or not things are really compostable, but if you can provide that for cheaper than the plastic mug, they'll go for that. But if it's more expensive, they won't. And that's, so you've got all of those things. So you've got to try and make it easy for people, cheaper for people, all of those things, I guess. And what else? I think for the circular economy businesses, that they're trying to solve so many challenges that a lot of them are getting, that it's really, really difficult for them. So they're trying to work out where do they get the waste and how they secure that as a sort of supply of material coming through, and then developing the new product or disruptive product that can disrupt that, and then they've got to take it to market. So I just think there's many more stages than if you're in a traditional maker economy, where it's easier to source. You can turn the tap on and off, you know, and so that bit of it is easier, I think, for them. So so the circular economy businesses are taking on much more, and probably should be, you know, have more government support to enable those things to get set up and working. But I mean, that's just my personal view. But I think they're having to do a much more involved process. So. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Alex. Cheers.
Richard.
Yes, hello, thank you. Really interesting presentation, Alex. Thank you for that. I'm interested in the sort of, I don't know what you might call a sort of dichotomy. We seem to have the local community sort of setting the principles of what this hub should do, and then you've got businesses within there trying to make a business out of, I suppose, what they can pick and choose of those high-level principles. But at some point, I think for this to work, it needs to be fully led by the businesses as it develops over time. It's great to have the community involved to create the space. But in that vein, I'd be interested to understand whether you're thinking about synergies between businesses, whether one business actually generates a waste stream that's good for another business, or even if you've got 3 or 4 in the sort of fabrics business, whether they can share waste resources when one's got a glut and another hasn't.
It's so interesting you say that, because that was a lot of conversation when we were doing that first concept with UCL. So when I showed you the sort of when the voice was coming in, and then I sort of liked the idea, and I just, the thing is, there was a lot of risk in this, but in creating a hub that was just for one material waste. And actually, I mean, I think you could have a community development trust that just sort of holds the space and finds it, you know, so holds it and has that lease, but then enabling all of those businesses to basically, as you sort of determine how the space works and who's sharing what. And when we were doing that work, the businesses were desperate for that to happen. The challenge is that if you do it all around, I think what we found was the risk of doing it all around one material waste stream, for example, is that if suddenly government regulations change, and then, you know, there's no actual need for this sort of thing because everybody has to do it in a certain way, then you've got a bit of a problem. And also, if you've created a structure which relies on one person doing one thing to then link to the other person, to then link to the other person, to then link to the other, if someone falls away in that chain, your then whole model is at risk. Whereas if you've just got a mixture of businesses, and if one leaves, you can easily replace them with another because there's no dependencies, I guess. So we had lots of debate about it, and I don't know. I think you could test. I think you could test it. To be honest, I think it would be quite an interesting thing to look at doing one material waste stream, or it would be quite interesting. Because I think in terms of innovation and like actually moving the agenda on, they'd probably achieve quite a lot. Whereas with what we're producing is de-risking it, but is it going to have the same sort of innovative outcomes? Possibly not.
I think you talked about there, if you create the network and one part of it falls away, you need to think about whether, as you follow that waste stream or that product through the network, whether that company that folded was actually making their fair share of the profit of the end product. I think that's the question, because if it becomes a network, every part of that network needs to make an equitable part of the profit, don't they?
Yeah, it's true. I really got to go. I could probably take one more question or an email, but sorry, because I thought we were until 1:45, but I've got another appointment that I meant to be at. I don't want to cut it short. Or I can also email me. People can email me if that's okay, and I'm happy to pick up questions. Is that all right, Ramya?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. No problem. We'll do that. Thanks a lot for your time, Alex. I think everyone really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you all for participating.
I can forward this to you if it's useful as well. You can have that, and then you can send it to the group. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for
Thank you.
organizing. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.